This week I'm joined by a special guest, Derrick McManus. Derrick is an ex-police officer of the South Australian Star Group Special Operations Division, where he shares a colourful story of where he got shot multiple times and what came after it, the resilience he built, and also during the episode we explore the importance of visualising what could happen, what could work, what could go wrong, and the importance of being able to share that with loved ones. So this episode's a ripper, so tune in to listen to the rest of it. Welcome back to another episode of Lifelong Learner. I'm joined today by special guest, Derrick McManus. Welcome, Derrick. How are you?
Mate, sensational. Great to be here.
Yeah. And so, Derrick, I'm going to give our listeners a little bit of a rundown of your background, but I am sure to be missing a few. So I'll throw it to you after to fill in the blanks. And Derrick's got a very colourful past, and used to be a former police officer in multiple different departments, and a sharpshooter, a sniper in the counterterrorist department. And was it 40 plus years you were in the force?
42 yeah. And 11 years in the Star Group, which is what you're talking about now.
Yeah.
Special Task and Rescue.
And now founder of the Centre of Human Durability out in South Australia, and professional speaker, and I am missing so much more. So help me fill in the blank there.
Listen, the priority of my life is I'm a father of 4 kids, 2 stepchildren and 2 biological children. And that, as well as everything else I've done in my life, that's got to be the greatest pleasure, as I'm sure many of your listeners would appreciate. But my life has been long and varied. I've played just about every sport. I've worked in many different places within the police department, but certainly Star Group was one of the most pleasures to be in. It was high risk arrest, it was hostage siege, it was counterterrorism. In fact, I trained with the military SAF in counterterrorism and brought those skills back to the police. We were VIP security or close quarter protection to the Queen when the Queen came out. We did cliff rescue, cave rescue, mine rescue, helicopter operations, undercover work. It was just sensational. My mother had a different opinion of it, but I loved it.
That's awesome. And I want to go dive into that chapter of your life in a little bit. But taking you back, kind of what drew you to the police force, and was it kind of straight out of high school, uni? What was the draw? And take me back a little bit, kind of give me a bit of a history.
Okay, so I'll take you back to my childhood here, where my brother was my hero. He was 2 years older than me, and everything Brian wanted to do, Derrick wanted to do, and the whole world knew it, but Derrick tried to deny it. And Brian, my brother, said he wanted to become a police officer. So I've gone, I want to become a police officer too. And everybody said, you only want to do that because of what Brian. No, I want to do it. I want to. My brother changed his mind. He became a butcher. But I couldn't change my mind. Otherwise, I'd prove everybody right. So I became a police officer. So it was never a deep, deep passion for me, even though I thoroughly enjoyed it. Absolutely loved the job. But I was never one of those passionate pop that eats, sleeps, drinks, dreams about policing. But I was good at it as well. And at one point, I got bored of being a police officer. And this shows you how long ago it was. I was looking through the newspaper at the job ad. There was no seat back in my day. Mm-hmm. And somebody, other people are suggesting, why don't you become a detective, go to the dog squad, all this stuff. And someone suggested Star Group, and I've gone, you know something? I'm bored with what I'm doing now. I can't find anything else. May as well go there. It sounds like it's going to be a bit of fun. Yeah, challenges, but a bit of fun. It became my passion. I absolutely loved it. And essentially, I was chasing fun. And by chasing fun, when I couldn't find any other passion, I found my passion, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. No regrets whatsoever.
And Derrick, explain to our listeners what exactly is Star Group. So what, obviously it's a department within the South Australian Police, and what does it look after? What's its purview? Yeah, all that for our listeners that are not sure of what Star Group is.
Okay, so Star Group is very similar to what you have in Victoria, the SOG, Special Operations Group. Star Group is Special Task and Rescue. And it's all those things that I was describing before: high risk arrest, hostage siege, counterterrorism. I was a sniper, I was a diver, underwater recovery and tactical diver. And I was cross-trained in counterterrorism as well. And that our counter-terrorist role is high-rise buildings, buses, trains, planes, just knowing how to, assault them and take on terrorists who are controlling those assets. It's the cave rescue, the cliff rescue, the mine rescue. It is anything that you can think that is high intensity, high demand, physically, mentally, emotionally. Undercover work. We didn't do long-term undercover, but we did high risk, short-term undercover to make arrests or to protect VIPs or whatever. So John Howard was one of the people that we were close quarter protection to. Controversially, Pauline Hanson for a while there as well. But when the Queen came out, our whole entire section was dedicated to close quarter protection and to advanced protection for the Queen as well. So it very physically, mentally, and emotionally demanding. In this high intensity environment, you've got to stay calm, but highly alert as well.
And how many officers were in the Star Group at the time?
Star Group has got a higher number of officers than any other state. So each state has their own. I think the SOG in Victoria has 30. We had 58.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
And out of
And,
all, sorry, go on.
oh, and I was just going to say, we are funded partly by the state government because we're state-based police. But once you get into the special operations area like Star Group, SOG, we start getting funding from the federal government as well. And so we've got all the boys' toys you can ever ask for. Yeah. Absolutely.
What was out of all the tasks and operations you're part of, what was your favorite type of within that? Because it's a broad range of skills and tools that you use during that time. What was the favorite where you go, you know what? Oh, yeah, this is going to be good.
Yeah, anything to do with the helicopter. Getting up in the chopper was absolutely brilliant. However, I must admit, I'd never ridden in a helicopter before Star Group, but the first 3 times that I rode in the helicopter, I fell asleep. The first one I'd been on an operation down south where a high risk arrest, somebody was threatening to shoot his brother because his brother was having an affair with his wife. And it was a small country town. So we went down there. We got the job late at night when just before we were about to knock off, but there wasn't enough time to call in the next shift. So we went down there and I'd been operating for about 28 hours with about 10 minutes sleep twice. And so when we got into the helicopter, it's like, oh, this is great. Oh, just completely wound down. The next one, I was looking for a ship on the ocean, and I was sitting in the back of the helicopter, and the night sun was out the front searching for the ship. I couldn't see the night sun. I was in the back. I was looking out, and it was just all black. I got bored within 10 minutes, and I struggled to keep my eyes open. But anyway, and I can't remember what the third job was, but the helicopter was just exciting. Being a sniper and being on the helicopter, using the helicopter as a platform for sniping. The doors are open, you're lying on the floor, you're hanging out the door. As a diver, we would stand on the skid of the helicopter on the outside and just hang onto the outside of the helicopter, fly into position and dispatch from there. They would then come and pick us up in the ocean, and they'd just have a wire bucket on the bottom so they could just come down to the ocean floor. We'd jump into the bucket, they'd lift us up and fly us out. That's where the term teabagging came from, because once we'd done the training, they started to just dip you as you're going through, just back into the water and back out. it was just brilliant. The helicopter was good fun.
Yeah, nice. And so tell us about the time. So you were shot 14 times.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, I think, yeah, that would be enough for most.
Yeah.
Tell us the story about that.
Yeah, so that's a really, really good story. So I've been in Star Group for about 5 years, just getting settled in, feeling like a good operator. Um, Star Group, extremely physically fit. My heart rate was around about 38. My resting heart rate was around about 38 at the time. On that day, I'd ridden my bike to work, 20 Ks, and always absolutely pushing it. Then did an hour of physical training at work with the other Starries. And then because Starries had a fair bit of free time to do whatever training they needed, I then went and played a game of basketball with the police basketball team, all during work. So this is about 5 hours of fitness training on that day. And then we got a call that we needed to go and arrest the guy who we'd had a couple of jobs with before. So we knew that this guy had the potential to be violent. Never done anything of violence, so we couldn't just go and smash into the house and arrest him. We had to give him the opportunity to make a mistake. But we got the call, we went back, had a very in-depth briefing, knew exactly what we were doing, went out to his house. It was always difficult. He'd been accused of, well, sorry, he was in court for 197 counts of fraud. And when I say 197 counts of fraud, that's all they could get him into court for. There was a whole heap of other charges that were outstanding and still being investigated. But he knew that he was going to get sentenced. So he feigned an attack of fainting, went away to hospital, released himself from hospital, and his wife rang up the next day and said, Tony can't come into hospital today. Can't come into court today because he's in the Nuriukta hospital. Small flaw in the plan, there is no Nuriukta hospital. But we knew this guy's history. So the courts issued a warrant to arrest him and bring him to court. We went out there, we were in full police uniform, and we were wearing what we call flak vests. They stop a certain type of bullet and a certain type of shrapnel, but they don't stop all bullets. Your audience may know them as bulletproof vests, because that's what most people call them. And I am living proof. They are not bulletproof. But we went to the front door, we knocked, we called, there was no answer. But we knew he was inside because we had one of our other snipers sitting in the bush for about the last 20 minutes. And we knew he should be answering the door. So we knocked again, we called again. Again, there was no answer. At this stage, I've gone down the side of the house because we were going to enter through the front door, which meant breaking in through the screen door and then breaking in through a wooden door. And I went to look at another glass sliding door that would have been a faster, more efficient, more effective, safer entry if we're able to use that. I went down to have a look at it and I was going to assess it and come back to talk to the sergeant. And I knew I had time to do that. And it's something that's encouraged within Star Group to always look for secondary options. I knew I had time because I was the one who had to pop the screen door before anybody else could do anything. And it was only 5 steps that I had to take to look at the screen door. But as I got to within about 2 feet of the screen door, the offender saw me, he started shooting, and I was the target of what he was shooting at. He fired 18 times with a Chinese military weapon. And for anybody who knows about weapons, it was a 7.62 or 308 caliber, which is the largest caliber that they use in war for general purpose. And he fired 18 times and hit me 14 times. And when I say, I was shot 14 times, it hit 14 times with either bullets or shrapnel. But every one of those hits was a significant hit. I had one bullet that hit my left forearm. It broke the radius, severed the radial artery, damaged nerve, stretched tendon. A piece of shrapnel severed the ulnar artery on my right wrist. 2 bullets into my stomach. One went through my small intestine, one went through my large intestine, and I lost 45 centimeters of bowel in surgery afterwards. Two bullets into my left thigh, missed the femoral artery by a piece of paper, but tore out about 30% of the muscle. Three either bullets or bits of shrapnel. Obviously, we don't know what it was, but they just skipped across the back of my left calf, enough to leave injuries needing 3 stitches each on those injuries. One bullet went through my right Achilles tendon, needing it took out 80% of my Achilles tendon, the thickness of the Achilles, and one bullet or bit of shrapnel went behind my right knee, and only needed half dozen stitches to fix that. Three bullets that hit me that didn't actually penetrate, but still significant hits. One hit a piece of equipment on my left thigh, a spare magazine of bullets, and that stopped a penetration into my left thigh, so that stopped a third penetration in there. Another one hit at my ceramic plate on my chest. Now, the ceramic plate is rated to stop a 308 rifle, but they tell me it's like being hit with a sledgehammer, absolutely smashing into, and the bruising behind it lasts for weeks afterwards. I didn't feel any pain because I was on such good drugs for the weeks afterwards. There was no pain, and the pain was focused elsewhere. But the last bullet hit an area of the flak vest called the groin flap, and that bullet hit the groin flap, stopped in the groin flap, and there was no damage in behind there. So very thankful for that groin flap, let me tell you.
So, what was the time frame of recovery after that?
2.5 years.
Yeah.
2.5 years it took me to physically recover. But I was lying on the ground with those injuries for 3 hours before they could get me out.
Is that how
Um,
long the siege was going on for till it was secure to take you out? Or curious to know why was it 3 hours?
yeah, absolutely. And everybody is always, 3 hours on the ground. What were you doing? I wasn't doing an awful lot. But my mates got pinned down. I went with four other members of the Star Group and one guy with a video camera. So you
Mm.
can actually see the footage of us knocking on the door and hear the shooting, hear me shooting back, and you hear me calling out, I'm hit, I'm hit. And the guys that I was with got pinned down by what the shooter was doing. It wasn't safe for them to come and get me. So we had to call backup. We were about an hour out of Adelaide to the north. Our backup was an hour out of Adelaide to the south. And they were doing rescue training down there. And so they had to get back to base, regroup, and then hop into both the helicopter and land vehicles and race to the scene. And they were only on the ground for about 10 minutes. And then they formulated a plan to come in and get me. And the plan just took them into highest risk you could possibly imagine. They were told the shooter is still shooting. There's a very real chance you may be shot and injured. You may be shot and killed. It's a very dangerous place. If you don't think it's safe enough to go in, you can choose not to go in if you don't want to. Every one of those guys stepped up to the plate and said, "This is what I'm here for. This is what I've trained for. We want to go in. We want to get Derrick." And there were guys arguing, saying, "Hey, listen, I should be selected. I've got this training. I did this. I've got this experience." So they were arguing to risk their lives to come in and save mine. But I was lying on the ground, fully conscious for 3 hours, monitoring my body, monitoring my mindset, and just using my mind to control my body so that I wouldn't bleed to death while I was on the ground.
What was your thought process during that time?
So it goes from comical to absolutely dead set serious. There's no two ways about it. But I was never overwhelmed. Oh, actually, no, I tell a lie. There was a period where I was completely overwhelmed, a very short period, but then it kicked back in. So when the bullets first hit me, I had absolutely no idea what's happening to me. And I just started suddenly falling to the ground. And I started cursing myself. Hadn't felt any impact, hadn't felt any pain, hadn't even heard the sound of gunfire. All I knew was I'd fallen to the ground. And as a highly trained star group officer falling for no reason, I was abusing myself. And halfway to the ground, I saw these small round holes in the glass door, and then I heard the sound of gunfire somewhere in the distance behind it. But I still hadn't felt any impact, hadn't felt any pain, but I've rationalized to myself, I must be falling because I'm getting shot. So
Mm.
even before I hit the ground, I started thinking to myself, Derek, don't be too hard on yourself, because if you're getting shot, it's quite acceptable to fall over. And that's literally what I thought. I fell to the ground and time slowed down. It really slowed right down. And this is the only two bullets that I can remember hitting me. And it wasn't painful, but I felt the impact. And
Mm.
the impact was like a sledgehammer absolutely pounding into your leg. So it had that massive force, but no pain
Mhm.
associated with it. And then I felt that force travel up through my body, the percussion, all the way through to the top of my head. And then the percussion body just settled back down, and the fourth wobbled back down through my body. And then the second bullet, again, it's that sledgehammer effect. Shockwave up, shockwave back down, seemingly 30 seconds to be abusing myself again. In reality, it was, that space of time, 18 bullets fired in less than 5 seconds. But it seemed like 30 seconds to be abusing myself. How can I now lie here for 30 seconds and just accept being shot? So I knew I needed to fire back. But before I fired that first shot and returned fire, I realized I was shooting along the length of my body, and at the other end of my body are my feet. And when you're lying on your back, your feet are pointing up. And I knew that I needed to get up just that little bit so I could shoot over the top of my feet. But I've got my flat vest on, I've got weaponry, I've got equipment on my upper body. And so as I've lifted my upper body up, my feet have come up to counterbalance. And the thought that ran through my head was, I better not shoot myself in the foot, because the guys at work would give me shit for the rest of my life. You just imagine you get shot 14 times and then you shoot yourself as well. Um, but this wasn't overwhelm. It wasn't denial. It wasn't comedy for the sake of comedy. It was being able to do everything I needed to do while still having those thoughts outside the square. And part of the reason that I was able to do this is because 5 years prior to the shooting, when I first joined Star Group, knowing the environment that I was going to be going into, I had a conversation with my wife. And this is a conversation that only about 1% of police ever have. I was not trained to do this. It was just something I did intuitively. And why, I don't know, but it just seemed like the right thing to do. And I see exactly where it fits in now. But 5 years prior to the shooting, I've sat down with my wife and I said, going into Star Group, very real chance I may be shot and injured. I may be shot and killed. My question to her was, if I die, what would your life look like? Because I wanted her to take this with as much reality as I was. And I wanted to know that even though the massive risk was there, she still supported me going in.
Mhm.
And so we discussed what her life would be like. And I I didn't want to tell her this is what I want for you. What I wanted her to know was whatever she chose to do, I fully support. The worst possible situation I could imagine is that I get shot and she starts wondering, would Derek have wanted me to stay single and have just look after the kids by myself? Would he have wanted me to go and get married and have a full life and the children to have a stepfather? So I just wanted her to know. And I gave her three options that she could consider, and I would support every one of them. She could stay single, look after the kids if she chose to. She could get married and have someone help her look after the children if she chose to. And the third one was she could build a little shrine in the corner and just worship me every day if she chose to. The third one wasn't all that popular, but
Mhm.
you get that.
Yeah.
But I did throw that in. Now, part of the reason for that is kind of like the way I've approached me being shot, me falling over. Um, Adversity is the biggest killer of creativity in our minds. Okay. And if we can break the tension of that adversity, then our physiology will start blood flowing back to our prefrontal cortex. Instead of being in flight and fight mode, we will be free and the blood will start flowing back to the prefrontal cortex. And that's where we do our creativity, our higher level thinking, our problem solving. And while that's drained, we're not making smart decisions, we're making dumb ones.
Mhm.
So if we can break the tension, relax our bodies, relax our minds, get the blood flowing back up there, we can start finding solutions. So when I say that me thinking that, oh, I better not shoot myself in the foot because God's giving me shit, that wasn't desperation or denial or anything else. That was being so relaxed that my mind was still operating at the highest level and still doing everything I needed to be able to do. And people say, oh my gosh, that's amazing. You were trained to that level. And what I try to explain to people, and seemingly quite successfully, is that I trained myself for what I could realistically expect to encounter in my day-to-day life. And I now run workshops for how other people can train themselves to be better prepared for their challenges as well. And an exercise that I run for them is on a whiteboard. And I say, I prepared myself for what I could realistically expect to encounter in my day-to-day life. My day-to-day life, high risk arrest, hostage seizure, counterterrorism, helicopters, cliff rescue, cave rescue, Queen, all those things. That was my life, and I had to prepare for it. But what I'd like to do is make a list of all the things that you can anticipate that may happen in your life in the next 12 months to 5 years. And so I get this group of people, from all realms of society, and they will make a list. And somebody will start out with raising children. In fact, I did a real estate conference, and the first guy put his hand up. And when I said, "What are your challenges?" He said, "Raising teenage girls." And raising children is always going to be one of those challenges that comes up. But it's cost of living and aging parents and sick partners and pets going to the vet, um, and all those sorts of challenges. And once it starts, people start feeling comfortable about talking about what their bigger challenges are. So we took take a look at what their challenges are. And then I say, as a result of those challenges, what emotions or feelings are you going to experience? And it always comes up with anxiety, overwhelm, fear, procrastination. And then some people come to the point where they go, in actual fact, it's not all negative. Because raising children, yes, it's going to be a challenge, but I feel an extreme amount of pride in that, an extreme amount of happiness. And so we get both sides of those feelings, emotions. And then I say, what are the resources for you to manage those feelings? And, you know, get extra sleep, get involved in your hobby, talk to friends, meditate, go and see professionals, a whole list of resources. And I make people realize that the resources they have just listed are the same resources I had when I got shot. The feelings and emotions are the same feelings and emotions I had when I got shot. It's only the challenge that is different. So when I'm talking to you today, let's talk about your challenges. I want you to be thinking about all those things that you need to deal with, and can the systems that I used on that day help you to manage your challenges? So it's very, very pointed at them. But the reason that I had that, and I didn't realize it at the time, was when I had that conversation with my wife and I said, what's your life going to look like? I then stood back for myself and I said, if I get shot, what could I expect to happen in my mind and my body? And I knew the absolute natural thing for a human to do when they get shot is go down to one end of a continuum into chaos,
Mm.
absolute fight, flight, panic mode. And I said, yes, that's natural. My mind will go into panic. My body will go into fight and flight. But what would a perfect response look like? And I knew that a perfect response would be A, B, C, D. I'd be able to do all these things. And that would be a perfect response. And so I had both ends of those continuums worked out. And if it ends up down here in chaos, how am I going to be able to control my mind so that I can control my body? Because our body will go into natural physiological response unless our mind tells it to do something. And if we can break the tension just by being a little bit lighthearted, the mind goes, oh, okay, you've still got that side of the brain working, so you can actually relax. This situation isn't as bad, and that blood starts flowing back to the prefrontal cortex. Um, and so I had that conversation with myself. A lot of people say, well, how can you know what you would, how do you know what perfection would look like and whether you'd be able to do that? And we need to be able to look back in our life and say, I've done these other massively challenging things and had good results out of it. We've also got to be able to be vulnerable enough with ourselves and say, I've done this other massively challenging thing and completely stuffed it up. And I don't want to do it that way again. I want to do it differently and I want to do it this way. So back in 1987, which was about 7 years before the shooting, I was involved in another incident down at the Jet Cross Hotel. And we had Jet Cross Hotel here in Adelaide. And we had pulled over two people in a car, really long story short. And when we were getting them out of the car, the male offender, I was standing on the passenger side, my partner was on the driver's side. As we were pulling him out of the car, the driver has reached over into the handbag of the woman and pulled out a pistol, pointed it at my partner's chest, and started pulling the trigger. But the gun was broken. And so my partner's grabbed the barrel. He didn't have time to get his gun out. He's just grabbed the barrel of the gun, pushed it away from himself, and called out to me, he's got a gun, he's got a gun. I've jumped back into the car and we've got into this wrestling match. We've got the gun controlled. I've got my hand on his wrist. My partner's got his hand on the gun and it's not firing. So we've got that controlled. I've got him in a headlock. But he's called out to his girlfriend, cock the gun, cock the gun. And that would make it active. It would be able to be fired. She scrambled over the top of these three wrestling guys and she's cocked the gun. And as she cocked the gun, I put my thumb between the hammer and the gun to hold the hammer back so that it couldn't fire. And I had to look at how did I have the know-how, the control, the calm to be able to think that through in that moment. And then once I'd worked out what that was, I took those skills and said, how could I use those skills if I do get shot to be able to help me control that situation? And it came down to four things for me. The first one was to control panic. Do not let panic take control of the situation. And the easiest way to control panic is to have some idea of what you're going to deal with and some idea of how you're going to deal with it. Mm-hmm. But it's got to be looking at the extremes. What are the extremes? Not just the comfortable stuff, right? Let's have a look at those extremes. Going into this situation of Star Group, all these great things could happen, but there's also the possibility I might be shot, and I needed to have that conversation with my wife, prepare her, and then prepare myself. A lot of people say, yeah, it could happen, but it doesn't really happen, and it happens to other people. It doesn't happen to me. I'm the lucky guy, or it's just too big a thing for them to think about. It's too scary.
That's right. Sometimes it's too hard. People don't want to think about the what ifs, right? And I think if you start to think about the what ifs, then in that case that it does come up, it's quite helpful. So Derek, I got a question. What led you to finish up at the police force and move on to the next chapter? What was the reasoning and the rationale there to move on to what you're doing now?
That's a really, really easy question to answer. I got old.
Okay.
I retired just 6 years ago.
Okay.
So after the shooting, I went back to Star Group, fully operational in Star Group, 2.5 years after the shooting, all that rehab, and we can talk about what that was. But I served in the police department for my entire career, fully operational, no restrictions whatsoever, even though I had massive injuries and disablements in my body. I didn't have the disabilities that were normally associated with it. Mm-hmm. So I lived a full career, and I started doing what I'm doing these days probably about 3 to 4 years after the shooting, and continued it while I was working. And now that I've finished, I call myself a pensioner who works full time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. And what would you say, except for the preparing for what could happen, what would you say your biggest learning of your time in Star Group was?
Contingency planning, absolute contingency planning. Take a very serious look at the choices you're making, the actions you're going to take, and then take responsibility for your choice, your action, and the consequences afterwards. But then there's a fourth level that most people don't consider, and it's what's the future going to look like after those consequences. Mm-hmm. So when I had that conversation with my wife about I may be shot and injured, I said to her, going into our group, going to be great, but the possibility of getting shot, that's the consequence. And I said, I want you to know right now that if I do get shot, anything better than death is going to be a bonus.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the future after consequence. Okay. And I said, I may live the rest of my life in a wheelchair, and I need you to know now that if that happens, so long as I'm able to interact with my children, I'll be happy. I
Mm-hmm.
know what the risks are. I'm prepared for those risks, and I'm prepared to deal with the consequences. Just being able to deal with my interact with my kids is exactly what I would, relish. But I also had that discussion with her. If I do die, what are you going to tell my children about the person I am? So it was very, very confronting. But that's one of the biggest lessons that I took from Sari is take full responsibility for your choice, your actions, your consequences, and the future afterwards. And the consequences is a really interesting one because consequences has a double-edged sword, right? And if you think about it, whenever you get called into the boss's office or your partner says, okay, something's happened, we've got to take responsibility for these consequences and take responsibility for, how things turned out. It's always about the negative. And the purpose of having this conversation is so that we don't repeat those negative behaviors, make those negative choices so that we don't have the negative consequences afterwards. And I like to get people focused on what about the good consequences? Do you
Everything,
ever have a
everything has a consequence, right? Either positive or negative.
Absolutely. But do we have a conversation about those consequences that are good? Do we analyze what choices did we make? What actions did we take to create the good consequences? Because when we have those conversations, we can repeat the good stuff as well. And this is an eye opener for managers and executives and companies. They go, oh my gosh, I never have those conversations with my people.
Mm.
And we've got to. If we want them to perform higher, then we've got to talk about what's the good stuff they're doing. And that conversation about the good stuff is a dopamine hit for everybody in the organization. They get excited. Oh, I've been noticed. People are recognizing this. And yes, I am doing well and I can do that well even more.
Definitely. And you touched on an interesting topic that I'm passionate about is responsibility. A question: why do you think? Oh, not why. Do you think that
Yeah.
as a whole, as like again, I know this is a very generalist statement. Society, majority of people don't stray away from taking responsibility, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. Where I know I work with a lot of clients and or like people within organizations, and they say, "Oh no, I can't do that." I'm like, "Well, no, hold on. You do play a part in it." And or people you may talk to that are not necessarily happy in their current circumstances in terms of health, fitness, well-being, job, career, relationship. At the same time, they're not doing anything about it, right? They're very quick to blame, quick to. Why do you think people don't take responsibility, or do you think that one? Do you think it is that they don't as a whole? And if you do, I'm curious to know why do you think they stray away from that responsibility or that ownership? But I've said a couple of times on the podcast that there's a really great book by Jocko Willink, Extreme Ownership, and where
Extreme up. Yeah. Yeah.
so
Great book.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that responsibility.
Yeah, I think it's a literally a first world problem. We have so many resources that if I get fat, I can take a pill. If my cholesterol gets bad, I can take a pill. If I get really bad financial circumstances, the government will give me a pension. I can get disability allowance. I can whatever it is. There are too many easy options for us to overcome that challenge. And there's a what do you call it? Axiom. Um, uh, there's a saying. Excuse me. There's a saying that says that we spend the first half of our life spending our health to get wealth, and the second half of our life we spend our wealth to get back our health.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, if we looked at that in reality, if we focused on both wealth and health in the first part of our life, we would be happier. And the second half of our life, we would just absolutely flourish. And I'd like to think that I'm a reasonably good example of that, because I have been extremely healthy in my first part of my life. My body now, 65 years old. I've just had a hip replacement, two partial knee replacements, and that's because my body has been through so much, and I absolutely knew that was happening. But I still ride my bike for 100 kilometers on a Saturday morning with a group of mates. We just go out and we have fun. At the end of 2022, I rode my mountain bike over the top of the Himalayas, 5,416 meters, and that 16 meters absolutely matters at minus 15 degrees. Now, that's not what a normal 65-year-old does. Normal 65-year-old, in fact, I get together with my mates and I always have this little laugh inside me, and I hope none of my mates are listening to me now. Well, I hope they are for your benefit. And I have this conversation with them anyway, but the conversation always goes to, so what pills are you on? What are you taking now? And I'm able to say I don't take any medication. I don't have any need. My blood pressure's perfect. My heart rate's perfect. I've got no cholesterol, all those things. And I think that's because of how I've lived my earlier life. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a food Nazi. If I get to a time where I'm getting tired and I'm getting overwhelmed with life, or things are just getting too much for me, and I want to zone out and just watch Netflix for a few hours and relax, I'll open a packet of Tim Tams. And I can tell you right now, when I open a packet of Tim Tams, I generally stop at about two packets. Right. So I'm not a food Nazi, but I know I need to indulge in that. And
Oh,
it's got to
definitely.
be guilt-free indulgence.
Definitely. And
But
I think
then I know that's going to have an effect on my fat levels, my health, all that sort of stuff. So I know it's not going to be something I do every day.
mm,
And I'll be back on my bike and I'll burn it all off. So I'm not a food Nazi. I'm not a fitness fanatic that has to, but I do live a good life, and
mm.
I'm living a good life still now at 65.
So why do you think potentially people don't want to take responsibility? They stray away from it. So as you said, you talked about choices before, and I'm a firm believer in every day you have 1,000 choices, right? And you can
Yep.
influence choices, and you can either choose to take responsibility or stray from it, or you can blame and look, and people. Well, what I want to find is that they stray away from responsibility. They go to easy option, and I don't know. My question with this is like, do you think people are becoming becoming softer because the options out there are making it easy to be softer? Are the options there being to take the easy option, to not do the hard work, right? People want all the gains with nothing in there, but they don't want to take the responsibility. They don't want to pay the price or the consequence for that hard work, for the gains. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, are we, like, let's take Australia, for example, with everything that we're putting into place, it's just all great things as well, but are we just creating softer people that don't want to take responsibility?
There is a huge part of society that doesn't want to take responsibility for many, many things. Having said that, there's also a huge part of society which is still highly responsible and doing the right thing. I mean, not all Australians are huge overweight or making bad decisions. So
Oh, definitely.
there's still a great cohort who are doing the right thing. But for those who aren't, it becomes that elephant in the corner of the room. I know the risk is there, but it's too scary to think about. I don't want to think about it. I'm just going to keep on doing what I do, and hopefully it'll turn out all right. Um, and again, I go back to it's a first world problem for us, because the first world is just so easy that we can be soft, and somebody else will fix the problem for us. Um, if you go to a third world country, if you go to um, Palestine, whatever at the moment, they are going through such hardship. They are making conscious decisions about whether they stay in an area, whether they eat now, where their next food is coming from, and they are, and a lot of them are not having the mental health issues that we have here.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's a first world issue. I think that we could be living life differently and be making different, better decisions, and our mental health would be in a better place as well. And that is one of the things that I talk about. I talk about personal performance and using all the models for that. And I talk about mental health, and I talk about mental fitness, agility, and strength. But we've got to be addressing those issues. We've got to be able to have open, honest, confronting conversations about the reality of the choices we're making, the consequences, and what that future may look like afterwards. And as I had that discussion with my wife, our future is not just about us. Our
Mm.
future is about our family, our children, our partners, our team, our organization, whatever it is. We've got to consider that our choices are going to impact them as well.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And so, Derek, we covered quite a few topics today. And what would you like to, if you were to create a bumper sticker, what would you impart on our listeners as some of the takeaways of either what we talked about today, or anything that you would want them to ponder that would bring them value?
Yeah, the bumper sticker would be an interesting one. That's a Forrest Gump type T-shirt,
Mhm.
bumper sticker type thing. What's that one little saying you have? Um, and my business is called Human Durability, and that's about going beyond resilience to sustainable optimal performance. And maybe that's it. Go beyond resilience. Find out what your sustainable optimal performance is in the face of adversity. And when you have those conversations, as we've discussed, you can actually do that. Resilience is our ability to bounce back. If we absolutely consciously take responsibility for our choices, our actions, consequences, future afterwards, we can sustain optimal performance, which means we don't have to bounce back.
Mhm.
And there's a whole heap of models and everything that go behind that. But that would probably be the bumper sticker. Go beyond resilience.
Right, great. And before we wrap up, I know I was going to say that was my last question, but I have one more. Curious to know the story of the Olympic torch that's behind you.
Ah, yeah, right. So 2000 Olympics held in Melbourne, and they put the applications out to public. Nominate your person or
Yeah.
self-nominate for the Olympic run so that I could run with the
Mm.
torch. And so I self-nominated,
Yeah.
but I encouraged my friends to nominate me as well.
Mhm.
And so when I self-nominated, I spoke about the fact I've overcome massive injury. But I was also on the parents and friends committee at school, and I worked with disabled people, and I volunteered with White Ribbon and a whole list of stuff. And so once I'd worked out what that was, I put that on a list,
Yeah.
and I printed out the application forms or the nomination forms, and I went to my friends and said, "I'd love to run with the Olympic torch. Would you like to nominate me? Here's the form, here's the reasons. I'll make it really easy for you." And yeah, as a result, and that is proactive action. If you want something to happen, go out and do whatever you
Thank
can. And so I got to run with it, and it's just absolutely brilliant.
I could imagine.
And
I could
and
imagine.
on this side is the helicopter that you can see. That's a scale model of the helicopter that was used to rescue me.
Oh,
Uh,
awesome.
yeah, and the doctor that was responsible for rescuing me, he had 10 of these made up. 10 of these made up on the other side, my screen's reversed. Um, a guy in Europe made 10 of them, very expensive, but he gave me one of them, and I'm
Awesome.
very, very honored to
Yeah,
have that.
that's awesome. And so, Derek, where can the listeners find you? Where can they find you to reach out to look into more of what you're doing in your work?
I'm on three of the most popular socials, so it's LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. I haven't got onto TikTok just yet. I'm not a dancing queen, but certainly I've got a website as well. You can go to my website, and that'll give you my email address. I'm sure it's going to be in the notes on the bottom of the podcast, my
Yeah.
email address, my phone number. And I'm very happy just to have a conversation with people about what's possible for themselves, either personal coaching or coming out and talking to their team or their organisation.
Definitely. We'll put that in the show notes. And Derrick, thank you very much for spending the time and chatting with us. I think I definitely got a lot out of the conversation, and I hope our listeners did too. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And the time has flown. I had no I did not realise that we used up all that time. That was brilliant.
It was
Thanks
great.
very much.
That's when you know the conversation's going well, when you're like, well, where did that just go?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks so much. Great to be here.
No worries. Thank you again. And listeners, till next time. See ya. Thanks for listening to another episode of Lifelong Learner. If you like this episode and want to know more and hear other episodes, head over to lifelonglearnerpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to our newsletter, where you'll be the first to know when new podcast episodes come out. And if you want to say hello, tell us a joke, or ask us a question, send us an email at hello@lifelonglearnerpodcast.com. Thanks again.